Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here for this important session, Children in Armed Conflicts. I hope that we will have a very interesting session, and I hope for us to have a very interesting session and a fruitful session also. When we talk about children affected by armed conflicts, we are delving into one of the most painful and complex realities in our time. These are children whose lives are overshadowed by violence, instability, and loss. Yet within this global hardship, certain groups of children face even greater adversity. In the introduction to this panel, I want to focus on one such group, Bedouin Arab children and youth. Let me begin with a snapshot of their daily lives. These children often grow up in marginalized community where poverty, unsafe living conditions, and a lack of access to educational, social, and healthcare services shape their everyday reality. These gaps are more than logistical challenges. They create fertile ground for further marginalization and, in times of crisis, amplify the risks these children face. Shockingly, during the Israel and Gaza war, our research found that approximately 60% of Bedouin Arab children and youth lacked access to protected spaces from missile attacks, leaving them directly exposed to the horrors of war. But the challenges don't stop at the physical safety. These children carry unresolved psychological distress, layered upon ongoing political tensions. The experience of home demolitions, for instance, is more than a physical displacement. It is an emotional earthquake that strips children of their sense of stability, leaving them grappling with feeling of insecurity and helplessness. Yet despite these challenges, sociopolitically, culturally, and linguistically, adapted mental health services remain scarce, leaving many of these children to navigate their struggles without the care they desperately need. Perhaps most concerning is the lack of research that truly capture the voices of Bedouin Arab children and youth. As members of marginalized community within a broader disadvantaged minority, their needs and perspectives are awfully underrepresented in academic and policy discussions. The handful of studies that do exist point to their struggles with low social status, their exposure to significant risk factors, and the potential for protective factors to make a difference. It's crucial to change this reality. Studies consistently show that improving living conditions, implementing equitable policies for the Bedouin Arab population, and providing culturally adapted mental health services can transform the well-being of these children. These children deserve to be seen, heard, and supported. As we continue today's discussions, I urge us all to consider how we can contribute to fostering hope, resilience, and justice for children like these, who are so often left in the shadows of armed conflicts. The session aims to shed light on the diverse and multifaceted experiences of children and youth from different regions and contexts affected by crises and conflicts. Each of our esteemed speakers will bring unique perspective grounded in extensive research to shed light on these pressing issues. Before we begin, I will introduce all our speakers and their topics, and then we will proceed with the talks in this order. There will be a discussion and a Q&A session after all the talks are completed. Please take in notes during the talks, and we will be so happy that you share that with us at the end. To start, we have Professor Charles Greenbaugh and Professor Muhammad Haj Yahya from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. They will present their work, Prevention of Political Violence to Children, a review of psychological research and tentative lessons from the current war in Israel and Gaza. Next, we will hear from Professor Tali Gal and Dr. Yonat Rom from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. They will share their research, children's rights and needs during the Israel-Gaza conflict, a statewide descriptive study on Israeli children. Following that, Dr. Hiba Zidan from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem will present her rights-centered research titled Co-Researching with Palestinian Children and Youth During Wartime, a right-respecting study. Then we will hear from Dr. Shira Taub Dayan from the Academic College of Tel Aviv-Yafo and Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. She will present her study, Voices of the Young in Time of Crisis, Stories of the Nuclear Disaster in Fukushima, Japan. Finally, joining us via Zoom, we will have Dr. Cristiano Dorsey from the University of Johannesburg in South Africa. He will present African children living in an apparently never-ending crisis, an assessment of the rights of Sahrawi children in refugees camp. Let's begin with our first speakers, Professors Greenbaugh and Haj Yahya.
Thank you, Professor Abu Kaf. We're honored to be here today to try to present this research and that we are doing, Muhammad and I. Muhammad will join in a few minutes. Today's topics, first of all, we're going to make some basic definitions. We'll try to indicate the seriousness of the problem of exposure to political violence, particularly on the part of children, the reasons why the exposure to political violence prevention is relatively neglected in the social sciences. We'll try to present a model for it. We'll try to present a research review of studies of children's evacuation from areas of political violence, not our research, but research done by others. We'll try to deal with the overcoming the barriers to the prevention of political violence. First of all, just very, very briefly, I think you all know that a child is defined by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child as a person from 0 to 18 years. At the same time, this is a little bit of a problem, it must take into account the developing capacities of the child. There are reasons, wait a second.
From the start?
We'll go into the problems in prevention of political violence and the outlook, overcoming the barriers to prevention. Definitions of political violence, there are many definitions, and one that we particularly prefer is one by Donatella Del Porta, the use of physical force in order to damage a political adversary. That could be both within or between countries. And a lot of the political violence occurs within countries. That's why sometimes political violence is used instead of the word war, which usually means between countries. We've already gone through this. The UN has defined 6 grave violations, which we won't go into now, against children, including physical violence, sexual violence, and various other issues. It turns out that if you look at recent surveys, and the situation, if anything, is worse than what we're presenting now. About 2 in 5 children in the Middle East, all over the Middle East, are living within 50 kilometers of a conflict event. Children in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, occupied Palestinian territory, Israel, and other war zones are at high risk of most of or all of 6 grave violations. At the present, there's non-compliance to the rights of the child, of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the Geneva Conventions by all parties in all wars. You can correct me on that, but even democratic countries like the United States, England, France, Holland, have committed grave, let's call them errors or violations. And this includes, of course, both Israel and Hamas. They do not do enough to avoid harming children and civilians. What about prevention programs? Why aren't there more prevention programs? Because they exist for prevention of domestic abuse, community abuse, school violence, sexual abuse. All of these are considered by most social scientists to be beyond the scope of what they do. There are ethical issues in this, because in trying to prevent political violence to someone, sometimes you can unknowingly or without intent harm them. There's an enormous problem. People don't want to get involved in that. The enormity of the problem leads to feeling on the part of many of my colleagues that there's a low estimate of success. What good is it going to do? Well, there are political forces beyond us. And the difficulties in obtaining cooperation from authorities to institute training programs regarding children for the police or military. We've tried that with the Israeli armed forces, with the Israeli army, and with the police. And we're told politely, I must say, but we don't need that. We're already doing that. It's okay. If it's so good, then why all the problems? Prevention is a concept in the social sciences. It really comes from public health and preventive psychology. We distinguish, and you can argue about the definitions, because the primary prevention, that is protecting an entire population from threat. Secondary prevention, protecting people at high risk, and tertiary prevention, treating people already affected to avoid future harm, for example, in hospitals or clinics. The decision-making, all of these people are involved in decision-making related to prevention programs. I'm going to give Muhammad now the floor, and I'll come back later.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. There are several models, as my friend Charlie indicated. There are different models for prevention. The literature displays models that are informed by research about how to equip children by the capacities, the abilities of coping with different adversaries as a result of their exposure to political violence. These models are, these strategies focus on risk, what we call mediating factors, and protective moderating factors that could result in enhancing the resilience of children in face of their exposure to political violence. Usually these models are incorporate the results of available research in their in intervening with children in order to prepare them to stand up against the results of their exposure to political violence. But there are models that focus on evacuation of children from areas of potential EBV, potential exposure to political violence, to safe zones. Usually these evacuations conduct assessment of risks and protective factors in evacuation and accordingly intervene with the children and their families. In our presentation, we will share with you the results of a study we conducted with Palestinian children, to almost 3,000, exactly 2,934 Palestinian children and one of their parents, based on a conceptual model that aspire for understanding the effects of their exposure to political violence and to examine some moderators of this exposure, starting by personal factors, ending with environmental factors. We argue that boys are affected differently than girls, although girls are less exposed than boys to political violence, but they are more severely affected compared to boys. We argue also that some personality factors could play a significant role in mitigating the impact of their exposure to political violence, but on the other hand, these personality factors could be risk factors if they are impacted severely as a result of the exposure of children and their parents. We also examined the socioeconomic status, the quality of living, quality of housing, the level of education by each of their parents, and also we focused on parenting styles that they receive from their parents, to what extent these different patterns of different types of parenting styles could play a resilient factor or a risk factor that could amplify the mental health of children. By saying mental health, we examined levels of PTSS, post-traumatic stress symptoms among children and their parents. We examined externalizing problems and internalizing problems among the children, and we also examined different patterns of psychological distress among their parents. We are in the process now of analyzing to what extent there is a relationship between this psychological distress among the parents and the PTSS among the children. But we did not publish this yet, but we will share with you what we already published. The study was conducted among children in East Jerusalem and West Bank. Unfortunately, we could not, at the time of carrying out the study, the study was carried out way before the current war. We could not get to Gaza, so participants from Gaza, we do not have participants from Gaza in this study. What types of parenting styles we examined? We examined intimate parenting and loving parenting versus different types of negative parenting styles like rejection and hostility. And we found children who were exposed to political violence, but they received intimate parenting, loving parenting. If they did not receive rejection and hostile parenting, they were equipped with better skills in order to cope with the ramifications of their exposure to political violence. Children that experience rejecting and hostile parenting, they expressed more levels of post-traumatic stress symptoms and more levels of externalizing symptoms or externalizing problems like aggression and other types of externalizing behaviors. And they also expressed more levels of internalizing problems such as anxiety, depression, and as I said, post-traumatic stress symptoms. As with regard to peer support, interestingly, we found that peer support is a risk factor rather than a protective factor, and we try to struggle with this result. one of our assumptions is that peers express their support differently than adults. Usually they encourage their peers to be more involved in the political struggle, to be more involved in different situations. This increases the risk for the children. On the other hand, we found that the more children were equipped with ego strengths, with higher self-esteem, and their parents had more self-efficacy, these results were associated with greater resilience among children. What do we mean by ego strengths? Ego strengths is described as personality characteristics that allows dealing with adversity, managing external stressors and internal distress, and bouncing back from setbacks. And what do we mean by self-efficacy? We mean that a person, in this case the parents, if the parents believe in their ability to complete a task or achieve a goal, in this case to protect their children from adversaries in general or from political violence, the ramifications of political violence in particular, the more parents were exposed with self-efficacy. And what do we mean by self-efficacy? Also, it encompasses the parents' confidence in themselves to control their behavior, to exert confidence, to exert an influence over their environment and try and stay motivated in their pursuit of their goal. That means to be more motivated to protect their children, to be more involved in enhancing the mental health of their children. And also we found that age, the effects of age are unclear. Sometimes in the literature you find that the more children get older, the more they are at risk. Their mental health is more at risk. Other research like ours revealed that the more children get older, the less they are impacted by their exposure to political violence. My friend, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes now.
4 minutes.
Thank you, Muhammad.
Sarah told me 15 minutes. That's not my...
Thank you.
5 minutes.
Very briefly, how do we protect children from all of this? One of the ways is evacuation of children before there is an attack. This isn't always possible, but very often it is, and it's not used. There are two basic studies of large numbers of children who were evacuated before hostilities. This both come from World War II. One is in England, and one is in Finland, where children were taken from the large cities in England, London, Manchester, Coventry, and other places, to small villages. The kinder transport is another example of actually a kind of understanding between Britain and Germany to take these children out. Large numbers of children from London were sent to families in the countryside. It was organized very well. Here's a picture of these children waiting to be taken away. Each one has his own belongings. There are people who accompanied them on the train, and each child of these over 500, between 500,000 from all the cities had a foster family. Each child had a place in school. It turns out I have a personal involvement in this because I was one of these children. My family is refugees from Germany, and when we got to England, my brothers and I were evacuated for a year until we got to the United States, but that was the situation. There have been follow-up studies of these children. I haven't participated in these studies, but a study by Santa Virta reported that psychiatric hospitalization for the Finnish evacuated group was higher than non-evacuees, only for females. This is an extension of the work that Muhammad mentioned, where females, children, are at higher risk for emotional disorders. The psychiatric hospitalization rate after these children, by the way, these children are still being followed up, they're now 80, 90 years old, is also higher in the next generation after the people who themselves are, again, only for the female children of women who had been evacuated. So, of course, the children who were evacuated lived, and they weren't physically harmed. But especially for women, there are problems. I won't go into similar research by Anna Freud, Dorothy Burlingham, a classic study that she did. The overall conclusion, there's no evidence of large-scale differences in mental health status in evacuated and non-evacuated children in Britain. This can be contrasted with what's going on now in Gaza, where you have evacuation, but it's forced evacuation. It's actually ethnic cleansing, and it's done pretty much under fire. You all know the stories. If you compare this picture and many other pictures like it to the picture that we've had before, you see an amazing difference, and it shouldn't be that way. It's coerced evacuation. It's destination of poor resources, continued attacks. Israeli evacuees also have been, Israeli children and families have been evacuated, but their conditions are far better than that of the Palestinians. It's possible to evacuate children. It has risks, but the risks, most children are resilient, as Muhammad mentioned, at some level. And the evacuation of Palestinian children that is going on now has considerable risks to children themselves. There are other strategies, we won't go into them now. What we need are more serious efforts by armed forces to avoid harm to children and civilians all over the world in all conflicts, including Syria and here and everywhere else. There are a number of other things that have to be done. The aftermath of war is also dangerous. We have, leave you with a couple of research questions which are pretty difficult, but challenging. There is a gap between advances in international law. We'll hear more about this in that conference. That's it. Okay. And the unwillingness of countries to agree on helping third world nations solve their own problems. Thank you very much.
So I'll start with the thank yous. Thank you for this talk, really. And thank you to the organizers for the important conference. And thank you, Tali Gal, Professor Tali Gal, for bringing me on board from the other side of the campus, the School of Education. So I'm not part of the law faculty, but education, but I decided to join this project that I'll present now on behalf of Tali and me and Maya, who is here, and Erez, who is not here now. And this is a work in progress. This is an ongoing project. And I'll present mainly the rationale and the processes and some of the challenges that we're facing. And hopefully in the next conference, we'll also have the analyzed data and conclusion. So that's a glimpse into what we're starting to work on now. And how do I use this? Here. It's not from the computer. Okay. Is that working? I can use the computer if it's better. Okay, let's try it. It's working. It's working? Okay, thanks. It's okay. Okay. Great. So at the previous conference held here a few months ago, in a session about empathy and forgiveness and hopefulness, I opened my talk with this sentence, which is also relevant, I think, for the present project that we'll present on multiple levels. So why start with the children? We're all obviously suffering, and the human rights of all of us are really in needs of protection. But why start with the children? So from the legal perspective, obviously, children are especially vulnerable and in need of protection, and protecting their rights and needs is a matter of urgency in that sense. But also from a developmental psychology perspective, and at the same time, from the policy-making point of view, we know that investment in the protection, support, and nurturing of children offers the highest cost effectiveness, let's say, the higher value we get, and the sooner we start, the more impact we will have, because investment in children is beneficial at both the individual level and also for society. So the nurture and support for young children who will grow up to be mature, healthy, adaptive, contributing individuals is significantly benefit society in return. And from the educational perspective, it is crucial to start with the children because they will be those who stay here after us, right? And if they're nurtured on humanistic values, so they are our hope for a better world. And finally, a rights-based approach highlights the importance of treating children as separate subjects of rights, including the rights of self-determination and developing their own identity, irrespectively of any future benefit. So that's to set the stage for our project now. And these are some data from a report from the Israeli Council for the Child, collected in Israel soon after the massive terror attack launched by Hamas and the war that follows. And this is, of course, a very emotionally charged topic to study and to discuss. And we're all in pain, saddened by the overwhelming loss of life and the consequences of war in Israel and in Gaza, as was also mentioned before. And given the nature of this conference, it is worth highlighting and emphasizing again that all children are always and everywhere innocent, and the rights to safety, development, and care must be protected everywhere. So let me start with empathizing two important points before we delve into the project that is done in Israel and not in other places in this case. So first, despite the ongoing situation of violent conflict in the Middle East for years, the October 7th attack was unprecedented for Israeli society in the forms of harm inflicted. So especially the kidnapping of children, including very young children and toddlers. You can see here Kfir and Ariel Bibas, who did not return yet. And the levels of ongoing trauma and post-trauma are still being evaluated in studies. Second, our project deals with data collected in Israel. And of course, research is certainly needed on the rights and needs of children in Gaza. We could not conduct such research across the border as the war is still ongoing. But we do hypothesize that the implications from these and other studies are not unique to Israeli children. So they're likely to reflect the impact of terror and war on children wherever they are. Okay, so what are we looking at in the current project when we talk about mapping, and I'll soon get to the study aims, children's rights. So there are the children who were directly exposed in Israel, I mean now, to war and or have been evacuated from their homes. And some of them were directly harmed. Some of them were kidnapped. Some of them family members were kidnapped. Some children still have fathers who are being held captive, and some are exposed to heavy bombing and belong to communities that were directly attacked. But also, all children and youth in Israel are likely to be affected by the war to some degree. And it is important for us to learn about this broader impact as well. And there were previous surveys and studies that were done by different organizations and also in academia in Israel to collect data, but they were mainly focusing on the impact on children's mental health and behavioral outcomes. And the data collection, for example, in this survey that I will briefly just present from Brookdale and JDC, so they were mainly relying on reports from government and other organizations or parental reports regarding their children. I wasn't sure if your study included also the children or just the parental reports, but I'll get to this in a second. This is something that we're also interested in. So, for example, in the results of this survey from Brookdale, they mapped the 7 areas of life affected by the war in children's life in Israel. So you can see the physical health and development, emotional well-being, family affiliations, protection from other, learning, social belonging and participation, and protection from self-endangering behaviors. Here is an example of another survey conducted by Goshen. I think they sit here at the Hebrew University and Haruf campus. And this survey empathized the effect of war on children's emotional distress as reported by their parents. And of course, within these 2 circles of affected children, there are also those from vulnerable or high-risk population. Who require special attention in times of crisis. I think it will be tomorrow that you will hear from Tanya Nitzan about a study conducted here in collaboration between a few research centers in Israel, and I took a small part of it as well, studying autistic children and their parents in the context of the current war. And you will hear all the details tomorrow, but I can just highlight, and it's not very surprising to hear that these children and parents are experiencing increased levels of anxiety, stress, depressive symptoms, even compared to the general population, who are all in high levels of these poor mental health outcomes. And also we learn, and we heard also in the opening remarks, and that's important. So there are populations, and this is also from the Goshen survey, that are, we have significant gaps in Israel in the physical protection and resources between children in different geographical areas, communities, socioeconomic backgrounds. And these gaps are this is something that children deal with in their everyday life, but it became even more crucial and significant in times of war. So in our study, what we aim is to learn about children's rights and needs during the war while also addressing these important variables. And the perspective we adopt is somewhat different to those I just presented to you, because we want to start from the children's right epistemological framework. And specifically, needs-based rights. So while rights-based approaches generate awareness, they often lack the effectiveness of driving evidence-based action. So this is an interdisciplinary, and we to some degree draws also paradigms and frameworks from other fields than law, and it integrates the normative principles from the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child with empirical insights into children's needs, desires, and definitions deficiencies during war. And it will focus on the how the convention's protective, social, and participatory children's rights are upheld, guided by the principles of equality, the best interest of the child, and so forth. So what do we aim to do? To map the degree to which Israeli children's rights and needs are being fulfilled during the Israel-Gaza war, and provide a statewide descriptions with an emphasis on minority groups, vulnerable population, and regional exposure to conflict. With the investigation of these key normative claims that you can see here on screen, such as preventing harm, protecting displaced population, ensuring continuity in education, housing, mental health care, access to information, participation in decision-making, non-discrimination, and safeguarding freedom of expression. So basically what we already did and in the process of doing is the development and distribution of a child-friendly questionnaire for 14 to 17 years old, as well as surveys for parents and professionals in education, social work, mental health, etc. And this questionnaire was built, drawn from the specific rights in the convention. So those rights were translated into items that we are directly asking the children and parents and professionals about. And we aim for a cross-section representative sample of Israeli society that will include Jewish and Arab citizens in Israel, but also Palestinian residents and Palestinians, for example, from East Jerusalem, where we can have access to immigrants and other groups and communities. And I will not get into the details here, but you have the expert, Professor Tali Gal, and you can ask more about the development of the questionnaire and how it and its relationship to these specific rights and claims. Let me give you a glimpse before I finish with the challenges we have. So I told you we developed the questionnaire based on the the rights of the child's convention, and we also, with the help of Hiba that sits here, translated this questionnaire to Arabic in a double translation process. And we had focus group held by, I think, Maya and Malak, that so children also comment and helped us to make this questionnaire actually accessible and suitable for children. So I have 1 minute. I'll run really fast about the main challenges we have. So we aim, as I told you, to get to parents and children, and that poses some significant challenges. So we know that parents should provide their agreement for the children to participate in this survey, and this is tricky because the rights and needs of their children should be protected by them as well. So we're asking the parents about the rights and needs of their children. Also, obviously, they are exposed to the effects of war themselves, and they will report on their children's states. The parents are reporting their children's states in most surveys so far. So this challenge is twofold. Like, we have two levels of challenges in that sense. It will affect not only the sampling characteristic, but also the parental reports. With children, we know that they are very vulnerable and should be protected from any risk, including risk of harm, including from participation in the research. So if we want to learn about violence directed at them, which is very important, we are also quite limited in asking them directly about those harms. So this is a tricky place to get. They should receive, obviously, their parents' permission to participation. So that means that perhaps those are in the highest risk will not be represented in this sample. And we do insist on asking directly the children because they also might hold perceptions and or knowledge about themselves that is very different to those of their parents. That's the end of my talk. So I'll let you just have a look at the potential contribution we hope for this study to bring, so it's not only to allow us for a better understanding of the impact of war on children's rights, we also will have a methodological contribution to the field with the development of this questionnaire that will be available in a few languages to be used in future research. And I will finish with this picture of Avigail Idan. If you don't know her story, I wrote a few words, but I won't share them now. I encourage you to look online. It will be very easy to find her story. And why do I finish with this picture? Because we do see hope with the ultimate efforts of adults to help children be protected and nurtured, even coming out from the most horrible circumstances. Those are her adopting parents, her aunt and uncle, receiving her back from captivity in Gaza. So thank you. I'll finish with this thanks for you to listening. Erez and Maya, who sits here, and Tali, of course. And hopefully, next conference, we will share with you the mapping of the states of the rights and needs of children in Israel in this time. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for your insightful presentations. Today I'm going to present a methodological reflection on co-researching with Palestinian children and youth during wartime, which is a rights-respecting study. This project was conducted at the Children and Youth Rights Program in collaboration with Professor Tali Gal, as part of my postdoctoral research. So co-researching with the children is an innovative tool for engaging children and youth in research and as partners and as collaborators, not just treating them as subjects or participants. And it's based on the Landis model of children participation for involving children in decision making and also in research. This model implements Article 12 of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, and it highlights children's rights to express their views and have them also considered in matters that affecting their lives. And it emphasizes also creating conditions that ensure meaningful participation. So Landis models have four main concepts. It talks about space, voice, audience, and influence. And it emphasizes the need for us as adult researchers to create the conditions and the environment for children and youth to be involved in the research with a safe and comfortable environment, and to allow them express their voices and have an influence in the research process by decision making and dissemination also. And having them also to ensure that they have that their voices reach relevant decision makers. So I aim to explore adolescent experiences with social-political stressors and coping and resilience, especially among Palestinian children and youth living in East Jerusalem. And today I'm not going to present the results of this study, but rather I would present the methodology that I used in using an advisory group of these adolescents, which helped me co-design and co-plan the project, and also conduct the research, the whole process of the research. So I will address methodological and ethical challenges in co-researching with children and youth, especially among the current war. And I also will give theoretical and practical insights into participatory research methods during wartime and conflicts. So just to give the research, to put the research in context, East Jerusalem is considered by the international law as an occupied territory, and its population are face or suffer from different socio-political stressors, especially youth who are exposed to challenges such as excessive policing, and I must say that also the separation wall and military checkpoints exacerbate these their daily lives and their hardships in their daily lives, and also especially during the war there were a lot of excessive policing and oppressive and silencing policies and restricted freedom of expression that created a high level stress environment and made the participatory research with children and youth very challenging but also very critical. Why so? Because participatory research methods fosters agency and a sense of purpose, and it leads to richer and more authentic data, and it ensures that the findings are influential in shaping policies and practices that affect children's lives in conflict zones. So for the purpose of this research, I have formed an advisory group composed of 7 adolescents aged 13 to 19 years who came from different socio-demographic backgrounds and with different educational levels and cognitive maturity levels, and who came from different neighborhoods from East Jerusalem. And most of the members of the group were female. I had 5 girls and 2 boys, and we assume that this because of the challenge that boys face due to political persecution and suspicions and search at military checkpoints. I want to cite one of the members who said to me something that I couldn't understand until I made all the interviews, and I asked them to bring colorful pens to the session, and he said to me, I come without a phone to pass through Damascus Gate, which is one of the entrances to Jerusalem's Old City. What do you expect me to bring pens for? I can't carry a bag. I couldn't understand what does it mean that carrying a bag in Jerusalem or in specifically at the Old City, until they told me that carrying a bag means that brings you suspicion and police search. And other members mentioned that military barriers, their phones are often taken and searched for incriminating content. And this just reflects the difficulty in conducting participatory research with children and youth in a vulnerable population and marginalized groups. And this is one of the pictures of the group, and they were engaged actually in the whole process of conducting the research. They contributed to the research, to constructing the research topic, and they were involved in all the decisions I took during the process of conducting the qualitative inquiry among their peers, and they took a role in shaping the research question, refining the interview guides, and also they were engaged in recruitment, in data collection, and in data analysis also. So, 2 insights in co-researching with children and youth. It's very important. I want to emphasize that treating youth as equals was very important to create a sense of partnership and to foster trust and highlight their unique perspectives and to take their advice and contribution into consideration. Another important thing was fostering trust and learning about their motivation and make an expectation alignment with them to understand why they are participating in this process and what they expect to reach from this and what I expect from them. It was very important to do this process at the beginning and the initial sessions with them. So during our session, I conducted a training session to bridge the gap, the knowledge gap between them and me, and to address the power gaps. Also, so workshop on qualitative research, including ethics, methodologies, and children's rights. And at the same time, I also acknowledged their expertise in their generation, in their age, and in their lived experiences, because they are the experts here. And I also want to emphasize the importance of respecting their choices, their space, and their cultural values, because children's voices are shaped by these factors, and they affect their participation in the whole process. So everything was taken into consideration with them, and by their choices, they choose to be at the university, at the Hebrew University, and conduct the session at the Hebrew University. I know that this is controversial, but that's what they wanted, because most of them were gifted students who aspired to learn at the university and wanted to get exposure to the university environment. So during constructing the research topic, I wanted to construct the topic with them and by them, and not just bring my research agenda. I wanted them to be partners. So I asked them to bring photos. They can take the photo by themselves, or they can just bring any photo that they feel that it reflects their daily lives. And not surprisingly, but they expressed the stressors that they experience at their daily life through these photos. And one photo that talked about one specific thing just opened a lot of dialogues and conversation about other stressors that they face every day. And I think that this, in a non-directive approach, encouraged their authentic narratives and also fostered personal and collective insights. Another activity with them was presenting the Bronfenbrenner ecological theory, and it helped them to map the stressors across different societal levels. And it facilitated a deeper engagement in the study. They understood the study goals and aims, and until they even changed the terminology. They have a decision on the terminology that I used in the process. For example, they rejected the word minority or minority stress in favor of terms like that aligned with their daily experiences, like occupation and oppression. They also were engaged in the interview guide, in refining the interview questions and the consent forms. So the strategies that was effective in my eyes during this process, that concrete thinking helps identify broader issues. The photo activity was an example for this, and also their partnership in setting the terminology of the research. It's like they are telling me, if you want to explore things about our population, you have to use our words, our terms. And the work were kind of a spiral work. The ideas were developing in circles from them, and from me also. They brought me ideas, and I developed them. I returned these ideas back, and so on. I also want to emphasize the group and peer-assisted work strategies, which was important because the older members of the group try to explain or help the younger ones understand the complex terms, and also the younger ones helped in adapting the questions that it become a more age appropriate question to the participants later. During the sampling and the recruitment of the research participants, it's very important to building trust, not only with the participants, but also with their parents and with community figures at their place. And with the help of the advisory group, I got access to several people who have effect on these participants and helped me recruit the participants. I can say that the Gaza and Israel war created trust challenges, and people were afraid to participate because of the recordings and the potential misuse of the data by authorities. And also the excessive policing in East Jerusalem specifically created this kind of fear. And therefore, the youth centers and community figures, the connections with these figures was very important to recruit the sample and create a safe environment for the adolescents. One of the ethical challenges in data collection was concerns about the potential risk of participants incriminating themselves by discussing sensitive or potentially illegal topics, given the over policing again in East Jerusalem. And so, with the help of the advisory group, the informed consent included explicitly an explanation about the study goals, and also we have explained to them that we are not interested in exploring any political opinions or views, or we are not going to ask about any illegal activities. So it was important to Okay, so one of the I want to share with you that the group was creative in that they have divided the task between the group and members who excelled, for example, in graphic design. They have took that task to create children-friendly flyers and so on. Some of them also visited the youth centers to help in recruiting participants. During the data collection, I want to emphasize the importance of taking decisions together. From the initial stages of the research, we have excluded them from data collection, again, because of the sensitivity of the topic, and that we were not sure that they can handle the potential for self-incrimination, and so we said we're not including them in data collection in conducting the interviews. And then later they expressed a desire to be to engage in that process, even in data collection. So we took the decision together that they can do the interviews, but not with their peers, not with parents, but rather with professionals, for example, social workers, teachers, and lawyers. And we sought another ethical approval for them, and they conducted interviews with professionals. Some of them had positive experiences and some of them not. And also in data co-analysis, we have engaged them in coding. We made a group coding and also individual coding. And I want to share with you that they have enriched the data analysis. And they suggested terms like stolen childhood and seeking safety, which highlights the adolescent perspectives and developmental concerns, and which I, as an adult researcher, did not consider them yet initially. And it was very powerful in my eyes. One of the ethical concerns during this period of data analysis that they are exposed to others' narratives, and we were concerned that these narratives will get them in pressure or something like this. But I can say that from the feedback from them, this exposure provided a platform for collective recognition of shared adversities, and specifically investigating these experiences fostered a sense of empowerment and purpose, especially since they couldn't change their reality by other means, and this was a mean that they can change or do something regarding their lives. That's it. Thank you. I want to say thank you also for the advisory group, May, Samr, Nada, and Kamar, Kinan, Sajida, and Rama is missing in this photo. Thank you.
So hello, everyone, and thank you very much for the organizers of this conference, and thank you very much for the insightful talks that we just heard. It's so interesting, and I hope that we have time for discussion. So I'm a developmental psychologist, and while much of my work takes place here in Israel, and of course also during the current war, it Today I'll present to you a research from a different place, a different type of disaster, and a different time. For me personally, I think that cultural research is a sort of an invitation for a perspective, and not only on distant and unfamiliar phenomena, but also on very close phenomena that are not always easy to identify up close. And I think that this perspective is crucial in the field of global crises and disasters. So the research I'll focus is about young people who grew up after the nuclear power plant accident that occurred in 2011 in Fukushima Prefecture, Japan. The photo in the opening is one that I took during my stay in the area, and it shows a group of children as they finish their sports training in the open air in Fukushima. While next to them, you can see one of the radiation monitors scattered throughout the city years after the accident. Today, I will share with you some of the lessons I learned from these young locals about growing up in the shadow of a disaster and the continuous life alongside the threat. So, children and young people, as we already heard, are usually a primary concern in times of collective traumas. While most of the psychological studies, at least, focus on their vulnerabilities, there is a growing need of research on children and young people's impressions, opinions, and knowledge of disasters, as well as on their roles within their affected communities. Recently, there has been a shift in focus in the social sciences research, with a new wave of studies highlighting young people's perspectives on disasters. This wave also calls for new and innovative research approaches aiming to gain valuable insights from young people's experiences in disasters and crises, as we just heard. From the point of view of developmental psychology, Bronfenbrenner, the processes of growing up involves the strong connections to families, peers, and communities, and therefore young people's views on disasters or crises can enhance our understanding of both personal and social processes in the aftermath of the events, as well as on the viewing of young people as important sources of data. A retrospective narrative study can focus on young people who experienced a disaster and its aftermath throughout their process of growing up. This sort of study can overcome practical, methodological, and ethical challenges in studying minors during disasters. And moreover, such an inquiry can provide an in-depth and up-to-date perspective, or time perspective, of young people on the psychological and social meanings imbued with disasters. So accordingly, the study I conducted employed a qualitative interpretive approach aiming to bring out the stories of young people from Fukushima Prefecture in order to explore their impressions from growing up in the aftermath of the nuclear accident and uncover mental, social, and political meanings in coping with the disaster among non-evacuated communities. So, as we know, nuclear power nowadays can be perceived as a human-induced resource or a potential threat, or both. The accident in Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant occurred in the Tohoku region in the northeast of Japan's major island. It was part of a cascading disaster known as the Tohoku Triple Disaster, and you can see its impact illustrated here on this map. Notably, Tohoku is perceived in Japan as a peripheral and rural area, and at the same time, and this is an image that was also reinforced after the disaster, Tohoku is considered as a picture region and the birthplace of Japanese traditions. So the chain of disasters began with one of the most strongest offshore earthquakes in modern times, which struck about 70 kilometers from the Japanese coastline. The earthquake itself caused significant loss and damage and triggered a massive tsunami that traveled inland in a speed of about 700 kilometers per hour. The tsunami was responsible for most of the casualties out of approximately 20,000 deaths in the triple disaster, for thousands more injured and missing people, and for massive damages to infrastructures. Hitting the Fukushima nuclear power plant, the tsunami caused a systematic failure and the release of radioactive materials. As a result, more than 150,000 residents from Fukushima living within a close radius to the nuclear power plant were officially evacuated. Tens of thousands more were evacuated by choice, and many others were left to live in areas just outside the evacuated radius. In the psychological literature on nuclear disaster, most focus has been on evacuated communities that might have been exposed to the radiation danger before leaving the area. there has been relatively limited studies on non-evacuated communities that actually continue to live their life near the restricted zones. So the present study focuses on the life stories of 8 young women and men who grew up in local communities in Fukushima outside the restricted zones in the 6 years after the accident. They were voluntarily recruited to the study that originally focused on the Tohoku triple disaster and included about 50 participants. The participants completed a semi-structured life story interview in which they related their stories in a free and elaborate manner and then answered complementary questions. While non-evacuated communities are usually unstudied and are not considered to be in official danger, all the stories of Fukushima's young people were centrally concerned only with the nuclear accident rather than with the other events of the triple disaster that hit their area. So, with the aim of qualitative research to uncover new material and deepen understanding, discovering this small group, which meets the definitions of a hidden population, provided an important opportunity to explore new and rare data. So I conducted a holistic analysis of the narrative, which revealed 5 central themes relating to the coping of non-evacuated young people and their communities with the aftermath of the nuclear accident, including mental, social, and political aspects. The first theme found in the stories revealed a strong fear due to the radiation threat and ongoing preoccupation, although, as I just mentioned, this threat was not officially acknowledged to place non-evacuated communities in danger. As one participant described, "Since the disaster, my friends and I stopped touching the ground and plants or eating local products due to a fear of developing cancer. Also, I don't practice sports anymore because it produces dust that is not healthy. My parents stopped practicing agriculture. They got divorced. Even now, I can't stop thinking that this food exerts radioactive impacts on my body." So nuclear accidents impose an uncertain and obscure threat of radiation that cannot be seen, heard, or touched, but yet can cause mental health implications. The present findings revealed that the complex nature of the radiation can already be comprehended throughout adolescence, and that its ongoing and ambiguous nature itself is the one that accelerated the hardship. The stories also pointed out a distrust in the authorities after the nuclear accident. As one participant shared, "After the accident, the government was hiding the real situation, so we won't have a sense of a crisis. I've been worried ever since. I still search for information on the TV and the internet." While there are reports of public distrust in the authorities after nuclear disasters and other types of disasters, the present findings stress the concern of non-evacuated communities. They cannot be sure if a threat potentially affecting their daily lives is or will ever be gone. The stories also show that distrust in the authorities can be accompanied by official contradictory messages to local communities. While these local communities were not regarded as being in danger and therefore were not evacuated but encouraged to proceed with life as usual, their daily lives became involved with multiple cautionary measures and ongoing monitoring of the threat of radiation. As one participant described, "Face masks were supplied to protect us from radiation. Until I graduated high school, there were routine medical checkups for cancer. The government gave us a strap to attach to our bags to measure contamination. Today, there are still electric displays around public places in my hometown displaying the radiation levels, and these are reported alongside the weather." So distrust in the government and inconclusive scientific data were a primary concern of migration of evacuated communities when they were allowed to return to their homes several years after the accident. The findings revealed significant distrust also among non-evacuees who continued living in the shadow of an ambiguous threat throughout these years. The third theme uncovered various social implications of the accident on non-evacuated communities. One such implication was internal conflicts in the absence of accountable and official guidelines, as one participant recalled. "After the accident, we were asked to refrain from club activities at school that were usually done outside. The parents had many disagreements about the issue. Some thought it's okay to play outside if the children wanted to do so, but others thought it's very dangerous due to the radiation, and the relationship among them were not good. Additionally, due to fears and uncertainty after the accident, tens of thousands of people from outside the restricted zone in Fukushima chose to self-evacuate. The stories show that this situation caused not only a geographical split among local communities, but also socio-political and ideological divisions loaded with disappointment, anger, and fear, actually suggesting that we cannot look at evacuated communities as one. So you can see here a citation from one of the interviews. And moreover, when we are talking about the implications, the social implications of the disaster, we know of radiation stigma against people affected by nuclear disaster in general, but the present study revealed that the social discrimination did not differentiate between evacuees and non-evacuees, as one participant expressed also here. After the disaster, a strong discrimination against people from Fukushima started to spread. Also today, I see in the internet and in other places that there are very bad rumors about Fukushima. For instance, that if you eat peaches from Fukushima, you'll die. The bad image is deeply rooted in many people's mind, and it's not easy to change it. So while the accident in Fukushima stimulated a global discussion on the use of nuclear power, the stories of young people gave voice to social effects of the nuclear accident among local populations. And in this context, the findings show that young people developed socio-political stance and became active members in their communities. After the triple disaster, calls for cohesion and an emphasis on social ties, a little bit similar to Biachad Nenatzeach, became central in the public discourse. However, as we just saw, the stories revealed that strong connections to hometown in Fukushima may involve identification with places that are at risk, and include fear, distrust, and social implications. Nevertheless, still against this complex background, the stories revealed strong connections that non-evacuated young people developed after the accidents to their hometowns. For instance, as described here. Because of my job, I can be relocated somewhere else, but I would always like to return to this area. In bigger cities like Tokyo, young people can find lots of interesting things. Although in my hometown we don't have many big and interesting things, it is the place where I was born and grew up, so I have special feelings towards it. And my top priority is that my family never leaves my hometown. So notably, the strong connection to hometowns expressed in the present stories was found not only under circumstances of uncertainty in the aftermath of the accident, but in times of population aging and depopulation in a peripheral area. However, in times of crisis, the stories convey the wish of non-evacuated communities to recover and also emphasize the significant role played by their young generation in this process. So the last theme found in the stories revealed that Fukushima young people were part of the recovery efforts in their communities and also promoted new initiatives towards this end. As one participant described, I participated in an exchange program with foreign students where we exchanged ideas about how to help the recovery of the area after the accident. I also decided to take a course abroad about the development of regions and railways. I want to contribute to my hometown and to Japan. So as we just heard, disaster literature has only recently begun to address the capacities of children and young people to engage in decision-making processes, participate in disaster risk reduction, and advocate change on behalf of their communities. The stories from Fukushima reveal the contribution of young people as they were growing up, not only as important sources of knowledge regarding coping with disasters, but also as active doers taking part in socio-political changes in their communities with the aim of creating a better future. So in conclusion, the central themes found in the stories of Fukushima's young people revealed mental, social, and political aspects that have hardly been reported thus far. As they took their first steps into society, the young people who grew up in Fukushima were found to be particularly aware of the wide implications of disasters and directed their developmental goals towards recovery efforts in their communities. The stories emphasize the voice of individuals and communities that are not officially recognized as being in danger and may be disregarded in the public as well as in the scholarly eyes. The present study joins a limited number of studies thus far that acknowledge the perspectives of children and young people in situations of mass trauma. And finally, I think, as a life story investigator, that personal life stories of young people, also after a rare type of disaster and in a remote area and among an unprecedented population, can echo shared human and social experiences, also across other situations of emergencies.
Good morning. Yes, I wanted to know. In fact, I wanted to send you my outline, to share my outline. Thank you very much, in fact, to having invited me. Although I'm only online, but I hope there will be a chance in future to come to Jerusalem. Yes, my expertise is strongly on Africa, so I'm going to present on the situation actually of the children, Sahrawi children that they live in the Algerian camps of Tindouf. Just to give a brief, following my outline, just to give a brief historical, legal, and geographical context of what I'm talking about. Well, in a period in which a number of international conflict and civil unrest are undermining the rights of children worldwide, as you also illustrated in your presentation so far, I'm trying to assess a bit the situation of refugee children in the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. The shorten is SADR. There is a partially recognized state which claimed the non-self-governing territory of Western Sahara, but in fact, at the moment control only the easternmost 1/5 of that territory, in effect. The SADR, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, has been proclaimed by the Polisario Front, that is the most prominent national liberation movement who's fighting there since 1973. It's been proclaimed as a republic on 27th of February 1976 in Birlelou, that should have been the Western Sahara capital, in fact. But in this context, I can speak of a permanent crisis, given that the tension between the relevant actors, Morocco on one side, Western Sahara's major ally, Algeria, on the other, do not seem to see an end, at least in the near future, in fact. Since 1975, Algeria has sheltered tens of thousands of Sahrawi refugees who fled their homes in Western Sahara. At mid-2024, that is the last data available. Of course, we will have a data for the end of the year that will be available in January. Algeria has sheltered, as a bit more than 7,300 refugees lived in 5 camps in Tindouf, in the southwest of Algeria, near the Algeria-Mauritania border. You probably know that Algeria is the largest by territory country in Africa, and Tindouf is in a semi-arid, almost desertic area. If you look the map of Algeria, you will find Tindouf really on. Can you please tell me when I was interrupted? I was saying that in effect we can talk about the permanent crisis, and mid 2024, an estimated 1,073 Sahrawi refugees, 1,073,000 Sahrawi refugees. Can you hear me, madam? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Live in 5 camps in Tindouf, in the southwest of Algeria, near the Mauritania-Algerian border. The South African Democratic Republic is a member of the African Union, in fact. And for this reason, Morocco has been out of the African Union from 1984 until 2017, when he was readmitted, when he applied to be readmitted again. But as I said, the South African Democratic, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic and Algeria have ratified in 1990 the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, that in converse has not been ratified by Morocco so far, in fact. That, on the contrary, is a part since 1993 to the 1989 UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, to which, of course, to which also Algeria is a party to, but the Western Sahara is not, because it's not a member of the UN, in effect. We have a problem. One of the problems is the food security in camps. So, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, cool. No, sorry if I'm asking, but really, I don't know. Okay, so one of the problems is food security in camps. And in March 2022, a nutrition survey in the camps in Tindouf showed an alarming malnutrition trend among Sahrawi children compared to the previous years. Some 54% of children aged between 6 and 59 months were anemic in the camps, and almost 30% of them were suffering from stunted growth, which has irreversible negative effects on a range of children development outcomes, including learning. Following up on the 2022 nutrition survey, the Food World Program conducted a nutritional causal analysis, NCA, to delve deeper into the core reasons and variables contributing to the population malnutrition. UNHCR and World Food Program started a food security and nutritional analysis at the end of 2023 to assess the food security and nutrition situation of the children in the camps. In November 2023, under the leadership of the UN Resident Coordinator, key humanitarian stakeholders in the camps launched the Sahrawi Refugee Response Plan for 2024-2025. The plan focuses a lot on food security and malnutrition, and the Refugee Response Plan financial requirement is estimated at $214 million, $214 million US dollars, almost 1/3 of which is required for the food security sector, in fact. Another problem in the camps for children, Sahrawi children, is education. And concerning their education, in mid-2024, more than 40,000 children aged 3 to 16 were enrolled in 89 schools and care centers in the 5 refugee camps in Tindouf. You can understand from this figure how big the refugee camp can be, because we had 89 schools of all levels, 89 schools, they are quite, they're quite a lot.
So Dorsey, you have 5 minutes left.
Only 5 minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Yeah.
15 minutes, so.
Yeah, sure. Under the age of 5, primary education, and with disabilities in special education center. A further 7,000 adolescents are enrolled as boarders in secondary and tertiary schools outside the camps, and they are totally taken care by the government of Algeria, in fact. The education sector in the camps is community-based and is entirely operated by refugees. In this framework, in 2021, the Education Coordination Group, led by UNICEF and co-led by UNHCR, adopted a 5-year education strategy following extensive consultation with Sahrawi education authorities at all levels. This strategy has since guided interventions in the education sector. In fact, given that I don't have so much time, yeah, we can see also the healthcare in camps. That 50% of Sahrawi children, as I said, have anemia. And this was dated to 2022. But humanitarian organizations provide hospitals in the camps for children with staff, medical equipment, and medicine. But there are limitations on the drugs that they can supply, mainly because of funding shortages. There are primary healthcare centers and 5 hospitals inside the camps, as well as 1 regional hospital providing basic health service to the refugees. However, no specialized health services are provided, and hospitals lack medicine and medical equipment. In fact, people have often, and children as well, of course, have to be brought often outside the camp to seek health services for serious health issues. And in this scenario, the COVID pandemic put additional pressure on the health system for children. Movement reaction hampered the delivery of medical items, and some medical staff evacuated from the camps. The high turnover of qualified staff because of low incentives and limited growth opportunities is also another challenge. I'm just jumping for my final reflection because given the lack of time. In light of the significant hardships faced, ongoing efforts aim to improve the living condition of Sahrawi refugee children, in fact. International humanitarian aid focuses on providing essentials such as food, water, and medicine. Various organizations have also supported comprehensive educational programs for children through language and computer courses. Additionally, at the local school and nursery, refugees strive to advance through education. All the students aim for university either in Algeria or in Spain. That is also trying to help a bit the refugees, the refugee community of Sahrawi. However, income-generating activities are scarce, which results in camp presence remaining largely dependent on humanitarian assistance with limited prospects for self-reliance. Additionally, there is a need to expand access to schooling and to improve learning, as too many children fail to reach their educational potential, and also, especially young children, adolescents, and those with disabilities are missing out altogether on education. To better support these children and help them build a future, more effort should focus on creating vocational training programs and providing resources for income-generating activities. Initiatives that foster skill development could empower Sahrawi youth, enabling them to contribute to their communities and work towards a sustainable future. Lastly, to achieve lasting peace in Western Sahara, the international communities must urge the UN to fulfill its responsibilities. Founded in 1991, MINURSO, the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara, is responsible for conducting a referendum on Western Sahara independence. However, unresolved issues such as voter eligibility and refugee repatriation continue to hinder progress toward a peaceful resolution of this conflict. Thank you very much for your attention, and please, if you have any question, I'm available to respond to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. Can you stay with us?
Yes, of course.
Hello. Thank you for your very interesting presentations. My name is Hili, and I would like to ask 2 questions. My first question is to, if I may be informal, to Charlie and Muhammad, if that's okay. You were talking about the responsibilities of mostly the international community in taking action to evacuate children, for example, from areas of conflict. But I wondered, what do you think about the responsibility of the states themselves that are involved, and how they can be, how they should be also involved in these efforts to sustain children's rights and resilience. And of course, I think that it is problematic that when we're dealing with our conflict, that the fact that in Gaza there is no state, independent state and authority that could collaborate. So how do you see this as an impediment? And so this is the first, and then the second question would be shorter, I hope. And this is to Shira. At first, when I saw the title of your presentation, and in fact that it was, put in the context of armed conflict, I thought you were talking about the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So I wondered if you have any, if you have seen any data in your research that were connected to these events. And this is a completely different question. It's not in the context of children's rights, but whether you have seen any evidence for the question of whether they see this whole event as a genocide. I'm asking this for my own. No, not the Fukushima, of course. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I don't know if you have seen any research on that. So, thank you.
Well, theoretically speaking, putting aside the current war, yes, states should be obliged not to bombard the populations, including children. And also they should be obliged to evacuate children if it's needed, theoretically speaking. Practically speaking, we are talking about the situation in Gaza. I'm sure that all of you are aware that 90% of the population there has been displaced. To where? To nowhere. There is no one single place for protection. They are protected. They were displaced to schools. Schools were bombarded. As I heard, without framing the situation as political, as I heard, there are some populations who were displaced at least 13 times from one place to another, and they are still bombarded, and they are still fooling by Israeli authorities by telling them move to this place, and they are placed as if it is a safe place, and they are bombarded there. So I don't want to frame it as a political answer, although the situation is political, and we cannot ignore that it's political. But I do agree with you. States should make every possible effort in order not to cause any harm to children. Unfortunately, this is not the situation, neither in Gaza nor in Israel. Children are harmed. Their education is stolen from them. If you talk on both sides, children are suffering. But the situation in Gaza, all of us are aware of the bad situation in Gaza, there is no place to flee to. This is according to my knowledge.
As usual, I agree with Muhammad.
I think you have a comment to Shira, not a really question. So, Shira, you want to reflect?
I think it was a
Question,
question,
yeah.
if I understand correctly. So I'll do it short. I try to in English. So thank you for your question. My research is about Fukushima accident, and of course I tried to say a lot of things in a very short time, but I didn't touch the collective trauma of Hiroshima, which is of course connected to some of the findings and some of the both the social and the personal feelings and coping of these communities that I met. So I won't take more of this time, but for sure, like I hope that my talk resonate other types of disasters, human-induced disasters and others, and they are all related, I think, to collective traumas that we carry with us to the past. And your second question, it will take a little bit more time to answer about whether it's a genocide or not. And they are not a collective, I think, when you talk about the Japanese people. But I can say on both sides that the example of the relationships, of the post-war relationships between Japan and the US has been sort of an example of how to make peace between countries. But it's more complicated than that, of course, and if you would like, I would explain it later to you.
Thank you, Shira. I think we can continue the discussion and also to ask the respected speakers also in the lunchtime also. I want to conclude our session. The 5 talks we have just heard share the undeniable toll that crises take on children, disturbing their safety rights and emotional well-being. From political violence to natural disasters, these talks illuminate the vulnerabilities of children in such circumstances and call for urgent attention to their needs. Another unifying message is the importance of truly listening to children by prioritizing their voices, experiences. These studies remind us that the children are not just passive recipient of aid, but active participant with value insights. Through these talks, we are reminded not only of the challenges, but also of the hope and the strength embodied by children in crisis around the world. Let us take these insights as a call to action to better support and uplift the youngest and most vulnerable among us. Thank you. I want to thank all our speakers and the audience for making this session happen.